This is Money, Motivation, and Mike, and I am your host, Michael Wainwright. In charge of all the controls is our audio engineer, Jason Wright. And hello to you, world. This is the show that can change your life. You can contact us at mx3.vip, or you can email us at info@mx3.vip, or you can go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@MX3 Podcast. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified of all of our new content, which comes out every Monday morning around 9 o'clock. Now, Jason, with the events that have happened over the last week, and we touched a little bit on the presidential debate the week before, and a lot of heat has come on our current setting Democratic president to withdraw from the election. And from that, I went back and looked at the history of the presidential position, and has this ever came before where a president pulled out and did not seek re-election at what I would call the last hour? Here we are in July, and we are 5 months away from November? July, August, September, October, really only 4 months, because it's the first part of November there, the second Tuesday. So in essence, we're right here at 120 plus days. So how at this late time could the Democratic Party put a new candidate on the ballot? Now I know that the Democrat National Convention is coming up, so the delegates have not been passed. But the sitting president right now has won all of the delegates, is my understanding, up to this point in all the primaries. So you, as a delegate for the state of whatever, will be going to the Democratic National Convention and casting your vote for President Joe Biden as it stands right now. So I went back and I looked, and we had to go a little ways, 50 plus years. But LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who filled in for the term for JFK after his assassination, then completed his first full term, and then was seeking re-election in 1968 for then what would have been his full second term. Now, going back and looking at LBJ here, and he pulled out of the race for a couple of different reasons, and I'm going to get into that. But let's remember this. In the 1964 presidential election, LBJ won 486 electoral college votes. Barry Goldwater, the Republican, had 52. Now, you have to go dig deep. I don't know if Reagan might have been close to that. I'm not even for sure, but he would have been real close. You'd have to go a long, long ways to find a president winning 486 electoral votes. And it's slim, as hardly ever been to that type of number. Maybe you look up and see what Reagan did. His 84 number would be bigger than his 80 number.
525 and 84.
There you go. And that might be the highest ever. I think he won almost every state except for one or two. I mean, it was a landslide.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So we know how popular Reagan was. A lot of our listeners and viewers weren't around and lived during the LBJ days, nor was either you or I. I was born shortly after Nixon was elected president, and LBJ was still the president whenever a sitting president when I was born, but roughly 25 days later, Nixon became the president. So that is how big LBJ's popularity was in 1964. Obviously, Johnson was sworn in as the nation's 36th president aboard Air Force One at Love Field 2 hours and 8 minutes after Kennedy's assassination. And he was sworn in by his good friend, Sarah Hughes, district judge and family friend. But then we come to the big old word Vietnam and the backlash that started against Johnson basically in 1966, at the time, a very, very popular president who had been riding all of the movement that basically JFK had started in 1961 and moving forward, and Johnson continuing that with not only his own stuff as well. But in 1966, the press sensed a credibility gap between Johnson and what he was saying at his press conferences and what was happening in Vietnam, which it led to a less favorable coverage of Johnson and his administration. As we continue on in 66, his public and political, the public and political impatience with the war began to emerge. And in the spring of 66, Johnson's approval rating had reached a new low of 41%. This man got 485 electoral votes, 486 electoral votes, and 2 years later, his approval rating is below 41%. Numerous congressmen and senators, congresswomen, were declaring that it was time to get over and get out. And of course, we know we didn't. By the end of 66, the Democratic governor of Missouri, Warren Hearns, now remember, it's a Democratic governor, LBJ's Democratic sitting president, warned that Johnson would lose the state by 100,000 votes, despite winning the state by a margin of 500,000 votes in 1964. That's how far it had fell as his popularity, just in the state of Missouri. And it was all frustration over Vietnam. It was also too much federal spending and taxation. There was no great support for the Great Society programs, and civil rights programs were coming into play as well. But the standing president was having a big time problem with Vietnam. And then when you're having one problem with one thing, everything else snowballs and escalates and turns into a big time issue. Johnson asked that year, actually January of 67, for a temporary 6% surcharge in income tax. Now you think about that. Can you imagine today, Joe Biden, President Biden, we're going to get 6% new taxes, temporary till Christmas. I mean, this world will be going crazier than it already is. Mm-hmm. Yes, 6% to cover the mounting deficit caused by increased spending. A lot of that spending was because of Vietnam. Johnson's approval rating, once again, below 50%, and his numbers continued to fall. And his number of strong supporters plunged to 16% from 25% the month before, which would have been December of 66. And he ran about even at this time in the polls with George Romney in trial matchups that spring. Wonder if George Romney was any kin or is any kin to Mitt Romney. Yes. Interesting. Johnson was asked to explain why his diminishing popularity. And he, quote, "I am a dominating personality, and when I get things done, I don't always please all the people," end quote. Johnson also blamed the press, saying that they showed incomplete irresponsibility and lie and misstate facts and have no one to answer to. The media doesn't have anybody to answer to today, I don't believe. It's just like right now. You can watch this station and you can watch this station and get two different responses. It's kind of like calling the IRS. Preachers, liberals, and professors all had turned against Johnson. He was struggling. Now get this. Now remember, JFK, LBJ, Democrats, and the congressional elections of 1966. So this is going to be the election before the presidential election of 68. The Republicans gained 3 seats in the Senate and 47 seats in the House. So the conservative coalition was back and back with big time strong, which made it more difficult for Johnson to pass his additional Great Society legislation. However, just for the note of that, Congress ultimately passed almost 96% of the administration's Great Society programs. Can you imagine either party losing 47 seats in the House in one day of election? Incredible. I mean, now, we have a few here and a few there. What we got right now? The Senate's like 49-51 or 50-50 with the VP sitting there with the final vote. Vice President Harris, on and on and on. You check that. Now, here is another big deal. Wanting to get out of Vietnam. At Kennedy's death, November of 1963, there were 16,000 American military personnel in Vietnam supporting South Vietnam in the war against North Vietnam. By mid-1967, nearly 70,000 Americans had been killed or wounded in the war. Kennedy had 16,000 over there. We've now got 70,000 lost lives by mid-67. All right, Westmoreland, he was one of the tactic officials of the war. Through Westmoreland sought to deploy additional U.S. troops, Johnson agreed to increase 55,000 more troops. Fewer than Westmoreland sought, but this brought the total number of troops deployed to Vietnam to 525,000 soldiers. Those are incredible numbers to me. Incredible. So now here we are, midsummer of 67, just a little over a year. About the same time right now it is in 2024. Johnson travels to Los Angeles for a Democratic fundraiser. Thousands of anti-war protesters, led by a coalition of peace protesters, tried to march past a hotel where Johnson was keeping this fundraiser going, where he was speaking. However, a small group of Progressive Labor Party and SDS protesters, activists, placed themselves at the head of the march, and when they reached the hotel, staged a sit-down. Efforts by march monitors to keep main body and marchers moving were only partially successful. Hundreds of LAPD officers obviously now having to get involved and be involved. And of course, the Riot Act takes place. 51 protesters arrested. The Los Angeles demonstration was one of the first massive war protests in the United States. Now, the reason I mentioned this one is because it was the first. And of course, from there, lots of others were up and taking place. As casualties mounted and success seemed intermediately impossible, Johnson's popularity continued to plummet. College students, this is interesting, college students and others protested, burned draft cards, and chatted, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" Johnson could hardly travel anywhere without facing protest. He was not allowed by the Secret Service to attend the 1968 Democratic National Convention, where thousands of hippies, yuppies, Black Panthers, and other opponents of Johnson's political policies were protested. Now, of course, by the summer of 68, during the Democratic National Convention, LBJ had pulled out. But he's still the president of the United States at this time. And he doesn't even go to his own election, his own convention, in concern for his life. One of Johnson's well-known quotes that year, "The Democratic Party at its worst," because he knew they were all in bad shape and down. Let me quote this, quote, "The Democratic Party at its worst is still better than the Republican Party at its best. End quote. LBJ. So now here we come to the 1968 election. Now, saying all this and the popularity that he had, that frankly our current president does not have. All the things that were going on. I mean, we know where the world was, especially the United States of America there in the 60s, and we know where it is today here in the year 2024. And making these comparisons to if President Joe Biden were to remove himself from the current Democratic nomination. By early 68, Johnson asked former speechwriter Horace Busby to draft a statement announcing his withdrawal from the 1968 presidential election to be included in his upcoming State of the Union address. And he did, but ultimately Johnson did not include it in the State of the Union address. Since Johnson had served less than 24 months, and he basically served 435 days. And by the way, Jason, during that 435 days from 63 up until 65, there was no vice president. And did you know that the United States federal government during that timeline did not have a way to fill that position? Did not have a way. How about that? So, since he had served less than 24 months of President Kennedy's term, he was permitted to run for a second full term in 68, like we talked about. And since there was no major Democratic candidate to run against him, that's why he decided to run for president, other than the fact that he was already the president. Only Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota challenged Johnson as an anti-war candidate in the New Hampshire primary, hoping to pressure the Democrats to oppose the Vietnam War. On March 12th, now remember, Eugene McCarthy, I've never even heard of this man's name. And I feel like I know quite a bit about our past history and the elections and who ran against who and who got defeated and why they got defeated. I've never heard of Senator Eugene McCarthy. In the March 12th primary of that year, McCarthy won 42% of the primary vote to Johnson's 49%. That's an amazing strong challenger who, frankly, before the day was a nobody. After that March 12th primary, 4 days later, March the 16th, Senator Robert F. Kennedy of New York entered the race. Internal polling of Johnson's campaign in Wisconsin, which was scheduled to be held the next primary, showed Johnson, who had not left the White House campaign, trailing badly. In 1968, late in 68, our midterm, Johnson found himself losing control of his party, which was splitting into several fractures. Although it was not made public at the time, another reason, and here we go with what our issues are today. Another reason Johnson decided not to seek re-election is that he was worried about his failing health and was concerned that he may not live through another term. That's one of our concerns for both these candidates. And unfortunately for President Biden, that really showed in that debate over a week ago. The previous year in 1967, LBJ secretly commissioned a study that accurately predicted he would die at age 64, which was on his mind, obviously. 2 months later, after spurred by health concerns and growing realization that his political capital had evaporated, Johnson again considered withdrawing and discussed the possibility with Harry McPherson. That was on March 28th. 3 days after that meeting, Johnson announced that, quote, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president, end quote. The next day, the president's approval rating went from 36% to 49%. All right, so maybe they didn't like what he was doing, but then they looked at the card and decided he was better than what they were fixing to get. Now, after Kennedy's assassination, when he had gotten in, and I believe he had won the California primary when he was assassinated in downtown Los Angeles. Johnson rallied the party bosses and unions to nominate his vice president, Hubert H. Humphrey, as the 1968 Democratic National Convention. Okay. In October the 31st, 1968, as Johnson's term was coming to an end, he had ordered a complete stoppage of all air, naval, and artillery bombardment on North Vietnam effective November the 1st. If the Haiti government be willing to negotiate and signing process with the Paris peace talks, this would all end. A week later, on November the 5th, Republican candidate Richard Nixon won the 1968 presidential election. Now, I said all this popularity about LBJ. Remember, Richard Nixon was the vice president of President Eisenhower, and Richard Nixon was the Republican nominee against JFK in 1960 and could not beat JFK, even though it was a tight race. I would not say that Nixon was really ready to be the president, even though he had a lot of time at the White House and being vice president for 2 terms. Probably wasn't looked at as the top candidate for running the country. And then, of course, he did the 4 years and then had the issue with Watergate, and the rest is history. And then we get our only president that was never elected, Gerald Ford, into office. But nevertheless, a big-time leader in LBJ with a lot of skin on the wall. A lot of things happened in the 1960s, of which he got credited with that. At the end, he thought it was best that he move on down the road because of his popularity dropping. And, I mean, where's Biden's popularity? It's not very strong. And his health. Where's Biden's health? It did not appear to be that strong on national TV a week ago. And even with all that, and HHH, Hubert H. Humphrey, getting involved in the race at the last hour. Remember, LBJ pulled out March 31st. We're sitting here in early July. That is 3 more months, April, May, and June. How could the Democratic Party get the current sitting president to pull out of the election and have another candidate ready right now for their Democratic National Convention and believe that they're going to win an election in November, just a few months away? It seems like a tall challenge to me. But on the other hand, was that debate a major deciding factor to finish off the Joe Biden presidency? But, Jason, there's a few names that have been thrown around if the current sitting president does remove himself from the Democratic nomination. Number 1 would be Vice President Harris. Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has been mentioned. Former First Lady Michelle Obama has been mentioned. Former First Lady and former Democratic presidential nomination, Hillary Clinton, has been listed. Now, of those 4 names, if you had a delegate and Joe Biden had removed himself and you're setting where's the convention's either in Chicago or Milwaukee.
Chicago.
That's right. Because we heard Trump say something negative about Milwaukee or something, didn't we? So you've got an electoral vote from the state of Oklahoma, and you're going to the Democratic National Convention. Joe Biden has stayed home. He's not going to run, and these 4 people are up for dibs. Who you voting for? Who you nominating?
Who has the best capability of beating Trump? I would say Michelle Obama.
I would too. He's already beaten Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm. And Gavin Newsom hasn't shown a great ability to govern the state of California.
Which is always in disarray, always on the verge of bankruptcy.
Right.
And I don't know about Gavin Newsom's popularity nationally outside of the state of California. When I know several, well, not getting off the subject, but why did Elon Musk pull out of California? Wasn't Gavin Newsom part of that situation?
Yeah, just business policies in the state.
Correct. I don't think Vice President Harris has very little shot of beating Trump.
And from what I have seen, she has the best shot of all of them, according to different polls.
In my opinion, I'd vote for Michelle Obama over Joe Biden today. And I was not a President Obama fan.
If it was an all Democratic list of candidates, yeah, sure, I would vote for Michelle Obama over any of them. But
my pocketbook still has not forgiven him for Obamacare.
True.
Of which 80% of your voters on average vote based on their pocketbook.
Right.
So those are potentials, and we'll watch this race closely and see, because I think that President Biden is having a live interview here. I think maybe even tonight. He's fixing to have a live interview, which will be his first public appearance since the debate.
I did see that. That's right.
And he needs to come off, I would believe, in raving colors.
But to be clear, I am not voting for any of those candidates if they're on the ticket.
I'll ask you that on another show. We're 4 months away from getting that. Don't be giving out all the secrets here early on. The people won't be tuning in November to find out what you think.
I understand.
But for the record, as of today, majority out there, this has been on a poll, majority out there not even going to vote because they don't like either candidate. And we don't want to encourage that, because voter apathy is what it's all about. That's part of being an American, is being able to cast your beliefs. I don't even want to say your opinion, because you're going in there and punching a card and getting to vote for who it is that's going to lead your country, right, wrong, or indifferent. Don't give up that opportunity. It's a privilege to get to vote for the United States of America. In any office that you get an opportunity to walk into a poll booth and do. So whether you like any of these candidates, whether you don't like any of these candidates, you cannot go and sit on your couch and say, I'm not going to get involved. Because you're a United States American citizen, and you need to be involved, and you need to be voting and getting out there and voting. Maybe it's the lesser of two evils. And I believe that people have had that thought over the last couple of elections, going all the way back to the Clinton-Trump debate and election, and then on with Trump and Biden, and now maybe Trump and Biden again. I bet Trump's in it. I don't know who's going to be the Democratic nominee, but I bet Trump's the Republican nominee. Hey, and you know, another name, I'm sorry that I forgot. We mentioned Robert Kennedy Jr. over here a while ago, who threw his name in the hat in 1968. And I believe, I want you to fact check this, won the California primary after LBJ had pulled out. Robert Kennedy Jr. is in this race too.
As an independent.
Yeah, he has not pulled out yet. Yeah, I think they're calling him the third party guy right now. But he's still involved in it.
I think they'll find that if he is on the ticket, then he is going to take a lot of votes from Biden if he's still on the ticket, or whomever that is.
Yeah, it'd be another one of those deals in 1992 where Ross Perot took votes from George Bush #1, and which allowed, because he didn't get any of the Democratic vote that Bill Clinton had. He took a George Bush votes away, about 20 million, which then, of course, Bill Clinton went on to win and then win again. Money Motivation and Mike continues to bring you content every week that seems to be encouraging, uplifting, and very informative to you as you continue to show us by our numbers, which once again, we did not talk about today. We'll talk about those next week. You can contact us at info@mx3.vip and find all of our content at mx3.vip or on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@MX3 Podcast. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified of all of our new content. Go do your information, get the information, and give your thoughts at the polls. Voter apathy. So for everyone who's been a part of this show, continue to live your life the right way.